everyone, and welcome to another episode of Small Town Big Business, a podcast about doing big business in rural Middle America. I'm your co-host, Deb Barnett, also the Executive Director for Southern Illinois Now, where we focus on economic development in the 17 southernmost counties in Illinois and advance our region as a great place to live, work, and very appropriate to this podcast, a really great place to do business.
And I'm your co-host, Jennifer Olson, Director of Business Development for the City of Marion, and we're here broadcasting from EThOs at the Citadel. EThOs, if you don't know, is a co-working space, incubator space, and we offer a variety of training to help businesses get started, grow, and find success. And one thing we would be remiss if we didn't thank our sponsors. We're well over 75 episodes and on our way to 100. And the people who've been with us really from the beginning include Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond Harley Davidson and RV, Fowler Heating and Cooling, Swinford Media Group, Watermark Auto Group Foundation, and our producer, Union Street Arts.
We have great sponsors, and you can enjoy the Small Town Big Business podcast on your favorite platform. Just subscribe while you're there, and also if you would like to join us on our YouTube channel, just search Small Town Big Business and of course subscribe for free so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. If you're new to the podcast, we interview small business owners and founders or those who work in small businesses to really discover why and how they are thriving in small towns like right here in Marion, Illinois, or in this case today, Alto Pass, Illinois, and really just discover the secrets behind all of that. So as I mentioned, Alto Pass, Illinois, we would like to welcome Crystal Schilling, the General Manager of Havisham Bourbon Brew and Spirits. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Awesome. Yes, you've got it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you here today. What an exciting job that sounds like. So why don't you start by telling us just a little bit about you and about your role there?
Sure. So I moved to Southern Illinois right before COVID happened, just with my little family. We had a little farm and randomly bumped into the owners, and that's how I got started working out here with Havisham. But fell in love with the area, and I've got a pretty heavy background in the service industry. So I moved to St. Louis from Florida, grew up in Florida, born and raised. I went to school in Orlando. So I've worked in heavy tourism areas for a very long time. So I think I'm over 20 years now in the service industry. So that's kind of the basis for my experience and what I brought to Southern Illinois.
So Florida, St. Louis,
yep,
and then Southern Illinois. Yeah. I'm always interested in seeing how people end up here in this region. So
well, for me, it was a man, but
okay.
So my husband, we met in Florida. His family's from St. Louis, so we moved there when we had our first child, and then he got a job opportunity out here, so we moved out here.
Very good.
So you said when you had your first child, so how many now, and how do you find balance?
Oh, I don't know if there is a balance, but I have three little boys, 9, 7, and 2. It's crazy because there's 3 of them and there's only one of me. But the balance is difficult, I'd say. Thankfully, they're just great children, but you definitely have to have a great support system. So my husband's family's not too far away when we both need a little break. But the kids are having a great time out here. They love nature and they love being out here. So I don't have a secret to that balance, except you just got to keep going.
That's good.
So you mentioned that they love nature and being out here. I mentioned Alto Pass, Illinois. I think the population is less than 500.
Yes, I think at the last census we were just over 300, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So very small village, but yet Alto Pass and the surrounding area attracts people from all over the Midwest, all over the country, I would say all over the world.
Yes, definitely.
And Havisham is definitely a part of that. So tell us a little bit about Havisham Bourbon Brew and Spirits.
Brew and Spirits. So we're on the Shawnee Wine Trail. Okay. So that's great for us. We get people that, even before we were there, people were driving through Alto Pass. And I think the town was possibly in a little bit of a decline before we moved out there. Originally, we purchased the oldest residential building out there and intended to fix it up. It was pretty downtrodden. It had been hit by a tornado and had a tree fall on it, and it just needed a lot of work. So the owners of Havisham Bourbon Brew and Spirits, Nick and Jerry Schaefer, purchased it with a group and intended to flip it. So they made it it's this beautiful Victorian home built in the 1890s. They totally remodeled it and fell in love with it, and then they couldn't sell it. So they put it up on like a VRBO up for people to stay at. And the first couple of people that came out and stayed loved it as well and thought it would be a beautiful place. And they asked if they could put a wedding, just pop a tent next to it in the grass and do a wedding there. And so they said, sure, yeah. And well, eventually that kind of turned into turning that into the wedding venue.
That is incredible. I haven't heard that story, that it was just a suggestion from a guest.
I will say technically it's because it was ruining Nick's grass. So he was like, we have to build a pavilion. So they built this beautiful pavilion to match. So now when anybody has a wedding out there, there's actually two houses. So they rebuilt that main house and then the carriage house behind it. And they're just gorgeous. So now the benefit to Alto Pass in Southern Illinois is that when people come and have a wedding here, they bring their friends and their family, and they have this beautiful wedding, and then they see all the great things that Southern Illinois has to offer. So they go over to Rendleman's, they go on the wine trail. There's so many things to do, and now they can go to the Bourbon Bar.
Well, and I would not be surprised to learn that there are people who, meet or find their love or solidify their love along the wine trail or in Southern Illinois, maybe even participating in hiking or a boating or another outdoor activity here in the Shawnee Forest. And I mean, to be able to come back and have your wedding kind of at the scene would be
right in the middle of it. I mean, it's a whole weekend. Like you can book, there's plenty of VRBOs around. There's the Cross out there. There's probably within a couple of miles, at least 6 or 7 different things to do in a weekend.
And you mentioned weddings, so we all know Michelle Searles at Rendleman Orchard. You mentioned Rendleman's, and she calls it wedding tourism. And really, she saw it firsthand with her own daughter's wedding and how many local vendors they used. And I don't even know the count now, it was a dozen or more. And one of the things that she has really talked a lot about is from that wedding, the people who visited Southern Illinois, as you said, fall in love with the area, and many have come back then afterwards for a girls' weekend or different things to do. So how do you see Havisham kind of playing into that sort of extension of the wine trail and all of that tourism that's happening?
I think it's a perfect complement to the wine trail. The wine is fantastic, but every once in a while you might need a little break. And for those people that don't drink wine, we're kind of also a destination on that map. So maybe the wives are out drinking wine and the husbands are like, let's stop at the Bourbon Bar, or vice versa. We have so many different offerings that I think there's something for everybody.
So even if you're not a bourbon drinker.
So we have craft cocktails, which is really like my heart and joy. I love the ability to create something really great that tastes great too. Mm-hmm. So it's just how someone might have a passion for baking or anything else where you make this beautiful thing and then you can consume it. That's how I feel about our cocktail list. So we have a lot of classic cocktails. We have craft beer, and then I do seasonal cocktails where I get to pick. Usually I try to grab some local vendors, so I'll use some jam from Rendleman's or from Flam Orchards, and I'll make some fantastic creation that fits with the season.
So I think if we can delete Franck from Father of the Bride out of our brain, a lot of people would say, oh, wedding industry, wedding coordinator, that's like kind of a typically female-led industry. But tell us about Ladies in Bourbon. And I want to know kind of like, how did this become something you were interested, educated, and passionate about?
Are we talking about the Women in Whiskey Club, or are we just talking about me?
I would love to just kind of like back it up, like, okay, Crystal knows bourbon, and how did that happen? And then like, how do you make it a joyous, celebratory part of what you do and inspire others, which is a lot. I'm sorry.
That is a lot. Oh my gosh.
So from A to
I hope I inspire others, so that's great. Most of my background's in bartending, so I brought that knowledge forward, but I've always kind of had a passion for learning about it because there's so many great stories, especially about bourbon and bourbon in America, especially. So learning all of that, you do have to have a little bit of a passion for. You also have a really good palate. You need to have a great palate for being able to pick out the different nuances as they happen. So there's the nose, there's the taste, there's the finish, there's different kinds of finishes and things like that. If you can pick out the notes, it makes you really appreciate what you're drinking. And that applies to bourbon. Bourbon has so many great ways it could go, as opposed to vodka, which is, kind of general to me, maybe. But you definitely have to have a passion about it. And I love that at Havisham, I have a really great support group. So, and the owners, they let me kind of do whatever I feel like doing, and they think it's great. So we started the Women in Whiskey Club. And I always like to tell people it's hilarious that bourbon typically is a male-dominated topic. It's kind of always traditionally been men. But at the wedding or at the bourbon bar, it's run by women. So all my bartenders are pretty much women. It's managed by a woman. It's owned by a man and a woman. But for the most part, the bourbon bar is very female-dominated. So to start our Women in Whiskey Club, I thought it would be a great idea to bring in women that maybe wanted to learn in a comfortable and non-judgmental way, and then just teach them whatever they felt comfortable with learning that day. And we have women in our Women in Whiskey group that maybe don't even like whiskey that much, but they love trying it and learning about it. And very often, the husbands will sit at the bar while we're learning, and then the wives will go over and be like, look at all these things I've learned. And they're excited about it. And now it's something new that they can bring to that relationship and talk about. And I feel like get a little closer over a nice glass of bourbon.
Awesome. I love that you're developing an appreciation for it too. It isn't just about sitting around and drinking whiskey. It really is just learning about so many of the stories and the history and all those things that you mentioned. And another way that you do that, so you are no stranger to podcasts.
Sure.
Because you have a podcast. Tell us the name of it.
Still a beginner, but yeah, it's called Toasted with Crystal and Wes.
Yes. So tell us about the podcast and what you all do. You've been doing it for a little while now.
We've had I think we're on like our 10th podcast. So we do one every other week. It's Wes Cook, who's a good friend of ours, comes over, and it's partly for me to learn as much as I can, and you learn by discussing. So we usually taste four things and talk about it. And Wes has his own profiles that he likes, and I have a very different profile that we like. So it's a great conversation for us to talk back and forth and talk about the history of things, because we come from very different backgrounds, and it just melds really great together.
So similar to wine, it sounds like bourbon, there isn't necessarily one that's better than another, although I think people would maybe say that, but it really is about your own preference and taste too, right?
Yep, and a lot of things can affect that. For me, it depends on the season for what I like to taste. It could depend on where I'm at in my day. If I'm going out that evening, if it's the end of the evening, I will taste different things depending on that. And just the environment around you. You could have a terrible bourbon and have a great environment, have some great friends, and you're going to love that bourbon for the rest of your life, no matter how terrible it is, because of that reminder of that great time that you had.
And where can we find the podcast?
You can find us on Spotify.
So I love the podcast because I'm the Cliffy Clavin of my friend group, and so I love facts. So I'm telling everybody about the Blanton horses and collecting the whole set. But if you ever read about the science of happiness, they say the difference between a negative vice and a positive pleasure experience is add people, add memory making, and add wisdom and knowledge. And I just find that to be so true. And so appreciate the time that you're putting in to learning yourself so that you can pass it on. We've talked about a lot of good things. Have there been trials along the way or pitfalls or things you wish you could redo?
I think on my end, I'm pleasantly surprised with how great things have been going. We've had some construction issues with the building as we were developing it and as we were building out the downstairs and things like that. But that's not a worry that I have. That one's on Nick. No, I think everything's been going. I've been surprised at how much people love the Bourbon Bar. I love it, but I have my own reasons to love it. and just have other people from Chicago, people from all over come back and say like what a great time that they've had. I would say our only issue, I would say, was growing faster than we thought we would. So staffing was an issue for a while there. We realized pretty quickly we needed to have a kitchen, so we had to develop just a small food menu. But I guess that's a good problem to have, and I see it as a challenge more than a problem. Like I think that's great.
So you talked about the house on, I'll call it the campus or the property that kind of started it all, but tell us about the building where the Bourbon Bar is.
So the building where the Bourbon Bar is was built in, I think, 1888. There's some thought that it might be sooner than that, but it originally was an old mill. It was right on the train tracks. So it was great positioned. Everyone would bring the grain in, they'd, mill it, put it right on the train right there. It's been a few things since then. It used to be an old warehouse or a hardware store. It was, for a while, a little Airbnb. It's been, I think when we purchased it, it was kind of like a knick-knack shop. So it's been quite a few different things, and you can tell when we purchased the building, I just remember going into the basement and seeing all sorts of pipes and wires and all, just over the years, just all the things that had collected through the construction of the building and how everyone added and subtracted different things in the building. Like if you look up on the ceiling, they're filled in, but you can see where there were holes where the chutes for the grain would come through. So we've tried to keep some of that cool old building parts of the history of the building. And then we just recently finished out the basement. So now the basement downstairs is a beautiful tasting room. And we tried to keep there's some great big posts or pillars. We kept a lot of those, and the ones that we couldn't keep, we replaced them exactly the same as they were before.
And I think that's just a great picture of what's happening all over Southern Illinois, certainly right here on Marion's Tower Square, in taking these older buildings and really just restoring them.
Revitalizing
them. And what we've seen here in Marion, Jennifer can certainly speak to this better than I, but it only took one person or a couple of people getting that started, and then it just snowballed. So do you see that same thing happening in Alto Pass?
That's my hope for Alto Pass. Even before I ever worked there, I remember driving through there when we had just moved to Southern Illinois, and we were going to there's Alto Clay Works, a little pottery place down the road. And I remember driving through that town and getting like this great like little mountain town feel to it. It reminds me a lot of like Silverton, Colorado, just something high up, and it really stood out to me in the area of just how cool it could be. And these old buildings, they were a little run down, but they had so much potential with these big glass windows and just this old architecture. And so I was really glad to be a part of this project and bringing the Bourbon Bar to life in one of those buildings. And I certainly think that I have the feeling that that's going to happen in these other buildings too. There's a lot of construction going on even across the street from us. There's a big old building there. That one's getting reconstructed. I'm not sure what's going in yet. But there's been a lot of interest in bringing those buildings back to life and bringing that town back to life. I think it's going to be really exciting and a really great destination place.
I think that what you just said was key. It's not just bringing the buildings back to life. It really is revitalizing a community and bringing the community back to life.
And we've had great support from the community too, which has been awesome. So I go to the city council meetings, and they're all for every time I bring an idea. They're like, yeah, that sounds really great and exciting and new. Like, we're on board. And I feel like the town has really seen that. I think there was a fear when we started the Bourbon Bar that it would kind of be like the old Western saloon style with bar fights and things, and we're not like that at all. We close early. We're very responsible. It's a very beautiful place. And I think now that they've seen that how great it could be, I think the town's really on board with making it something special. Mm-hmm.
Well, somebody has to be the first domino, though. I feel like for so many years in Southern Illinois, we got hung up in a you first mentality. If somebody does this, I'll do that. And, if there's an anchor that comes, then I'll build a small store. So thank you for doing that. You mentioned Silverton. Are there places or people beyond Southern Illinois that inspire you or what you're doing?
Oh, so much. I've traveled a lot in my younger days. I've backpacked through Europe twice. So I've been to Switzerland and Germany and love Spain. All of that food and the different kinds of flavors and people and cultures and things like that all inspires me. And then within the U.S., I've done a lot of Colorado and a lot in the South. Growing up in Florida, we did a lot of Georgia and Mississippi and things like that. And all of that kind of comes together, and every time I'm trying to make a new drink or something new and inspired or bringing in, we have wines from all over the world. And for me, it's not necessarily about where it's from, but it's all about the taste for me. So I don't necessarily follow the trends like on TikTok and stuff, but I pull from, here's this amazing ingredient that I have, how can I use it? And so it might be a problem, but I have a lot of just random things that I've collected since we've opened the Bourbon Bar, and I keep trying to make something new out of it, trying to make a new cocktail, trying to make something new for the menu, and just bringing that extra bit of flavor to Southern Illinois.
Well, it certainly worked for another Southern Illinois business, which is Scratch. They are foraging and sourcing a lot local, and now they're a James Beard winner, so maybe that's in your future.
Oh, I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, I think it's really amazing what you've talked about today, not only with the house, there's also, there are other, what would you kind of describe the property, I guess, so I don't mess it up. I know we have the wedding venue and the house and the Bourbon Bar, but there are other pieces to it.
Well, so it's kind of a cool, I'm going to back up and tell you a little bit of the history. So originally, the first building built in Alto Pass was where the Bourbon Bar is now. That's the oldest building. One of the millers that owned it built the house that we use for Havisham House, the big, beautiful Victorian house, built that for his wife. So it's, and in between the two spaces, there's kind of the grass and the ground kind of goes down. He dug up the clay to make bricks to build that house. So it's right next. So there's the Bourbon Bar. There's kind of like, it looks like a little bit of a field. And then there's that main house. And then behind the main house is the carriage house where they used to drive the horses around. And we converted that into a house, and then in between those, kind of in the back, is the pavilion. So it's kind of a complex. Like it's a pretty big piece of property. It's all gorgeous. It's all really well thought out. And I don't know what we call it. It's just all big one complex, I'd say.
I think it's really beautiful. And again, just a testimony to a vision that it sounds like that wasn't the beginning, or that wasn't the intent, but it has just really blossomed into this beautiful thing. So Alto Pass, I have a family connection there as well. My great-grandparents owned a hotel that sat right across the track. So right from, if you look out the front door.
Sure,
of
like
the
where
Bourbon
the bank
Bar,
is now, maybe?
Right across there. It's obviously not there anymore, but it used to be called the Minton Hotel. I've only seen one picture of it, but if you ever come across that.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, let me know.
That's neat.
So, it was once just a booming community, and certainly this is the start.
It was. The train tracks going right through there was a really big part of that town, and that's where, for a while at the Bourbon Bar, there was also a basket factory, and there's still the ice house is still there where they stored ice, so everyone would bring their produce from the orchards and load up the baskets with ice and sawdust, and they would load it right on the tracks right at our front door.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have one other comment. You mentioned Colorado, and I think it's interesting that you compared Alto Pass, the views, even no matter which way you come in, which way you drive. The overlooks and the views are amazing. But for people listening, if they've never been to Southern Illinois or specifically Alto Pass, you get all of those wonderful things, but like at a third of the cost, right? Is there
and less driving, so much less driving. It's really hard to get up in the mountains up there. But I think, they're slightly bigger there. There's more streets, but it's a good taste of what they've got going on over there.
The cost of living here is so much less. My son lives in Colorado. I see what he pays and others pay, and I'm like, gosh, you have all that right here in Southern Illinois, and so much less as far as cost of living, and we just get to enjoy all those beautiful things still.
Yeah. And there's so many things around still. Like, I'm just amazed at how many things there are to do around here. I know when we moved out here originally, I knew nothing about Illinois at all.
And this probably isn't what you pictured when you thought of Illinois.
When I left Florida, no, it was not. But Yeah, no, but there's so many great things. Like we'll spend a Sunday afternoon and we'll take the kids to the orchards, or we'll go grab some wine, or go take a hike, or go up to the cross. There's just so many things to do. I was really surprised and pleasantly. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because when you said Silverton, I was thinking of one of my favorite little funky towns. So if you're in the Phoenix area and you want to go to Flagstaff and not take the big highway, if you take the old cow path through Sedona and Prescott and all that, there's a little funky mine town called Jerome that is makes me think of Alto. Again, like people would say, well, there's not like a little mining town on the side of the hill in Arizona. It's flat. Well, same here. Like, we're not flat. We have interesting contour and terrain. And just like Alto and Cobden and other places in Southern Illinois, the first time I went to Jerome, there was like a hardcore biker bar and a pottery shop, and that was about it. And now there's all kinds of great little activities and restaurants and things to do. So we can do those trips and come home, find inspiration, and implement it here.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best trips are off the beaten path.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't have to go to Disneyland every vacation. Like, there's so many better places. I wouldn't say better, but there's so many great places to go that don't cost an arm and a leg and have more variety of things to do.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, you can't pick your kids' memories anyway. I mean, you spend all this money and you do this great grand thing, and they remember some weird thing about something they got at a gas station. So anything that we didn't ask you that you were like, I want to make sure I get these points in?
And I would just say, I think one of our strengths as a business is our staff, and how important it is to like train your staff and appreciate your staff. Through working at so many kinds of restaurants and bars and things myself, to be on the low end of that and have mismanagement, and then to move to management myself and trying to overcome that in my staff. It's been fun and rewarding, and I would just like to say that I love all of the people that we have, and they've all worked really hard, and I know it's a lot, especially for my bartenders. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot of old classic cocktails. You can't really find anyone with that kind of experience just to hire them straight out of, straight into the place and just throw them behind the bar. You can't do it. So you have to train them. So I actually prefer that most of our staff have not worked in bars, or at least minimally. You can train them exactly how you want them, and it's a lot of learning, but I think so rewarding once it clicks.
Well, and I mean, we always have the highest expectation of our frontline staff, and often they're, unfortunately, some of the less well-paid folks on the team. But for you, they're not just making cocktails. I mean, they are creating experience and memory, but you're kind of the visitor center for your area, too.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a big part of our training, actually. So I worked at Disney for about 8 years.
Okay.
So the what people see and hear is so important. So, I've been to many bars where you walk in and nobody says anything to you. And that's my biggest pet peeve. So, I mean, you can't walk into our bar without 3 people saying hi. Like, hi, come in. I know it's a little scary because it's a little different in here, and it's gorgeous, and you're maybe in your flip-flops or whatever. And we just want to be like, hey, come in. Let me walk you through this menu. Let me know if you have questions. Let me show you what I've got. Don't feel uncomfortable at all. And I think our staff is really great about doing that. And I think that's something that I maybe grind into them a little much. But I think that's really important on the customer service side.
I agree. And it's appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can tell. And when people come back after, they go, they know my bartenders by name, and they're looking for me, and I'm running around doing things. They're like, hey, come over here and talk, So it's good. It's like a little family.
Awesome.
So you have such passion about what you do, and I can't get through an episode without asking this question, because I like to dive a little deeper into our guests kind of what's behind it all. But tell us what your why is. What gets you up every day?
I'm going to say that my 2-year-old gets me up every day when he's hungry. But on the serious side, I personally love learning and challenges. And I wake up every day thinking, what is my challenge going to be today? And I look forward to it. And at the
That's
end of the
powerful.
day, I like to feel that I accomplished it, or I took a step towards it, even if maybe I didn't accomplish it. Maybe it, you know, whatever it is, maybe it didn't work out. But at the end of the day, at least I know that I tried and I learned something from it, and the next day is going to be better.
Whew.
Perfect.
Glad I asked. I needed to hear that today.
See, there's always
perfect.
going to be a bad day, but you just like move
Yeah.
on. You just let it go and you move on.
That's right.
So I know that you're adding events, and you're probably always chomping to get the next thing, whether that's distilling your own brew or whatever you have. So tell us about what's the future.
Yeah, so you kind of already hit it there. So we are planning to distill. So it's a lot of work. It's a big step forward. It will be for us, but we brought in our distilling director, is Eric Borup. So he's working on the legal aspect right now, but he will be distilling for us. So we're going to hopefully have some great Southern Illinois. Well, at first it'll be whiskey. It's got to age for a bit, but to be bourbon. But we'll have some great, cool bottles. Hoping to work with some local companies as well. Hopefully, some of the wineries will let us have some barrels, so we can re-barrel some things, and we can do some classes. And there's so much happening in the distillation world that I'm really excited about that project. So that's our next project, I think. And I don't know when the project will end, but that's the next one, and it's going to be really great.
Awesome. And I suppose the events since they're selling out, that will be continued into the future.
That's my fun project.
Okay.
I love making events. So yep. So we've had Cowboys and Cocktails, which was our Yellowstone bottle release. We have an Elvis night coming up. I'm going to make Elvis-inspired cocktails and food. We also have, for New Year's, we're having a Studio 54 theme, which is going to be full of disco balls and glitter. I can't wait. But yeah, I love it keeps it interesting for the staff, that there's always something to look forward to, and it keeps it fun for me because, again, it's my outlet for creativity. So it's great all around, I think. So yeah, those are never going to stop. We've got the Women in Whiskey group. And we'll bring back some more classes, some more tasting and classes too. We slowed that down for the holiday season, but my good friend Wes is really great about doing some bourbon tasting classes, so we're going to be bringing those back too.
That's awesome. I spent my New Year's Eve last year at Havisham, and I'm pretty sure that Alto Bass had not seen that amount of sequins in a very long time. So we had a great experience. Food was great. Service is just off the hook. So congrats, and keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Crystal, we've talked about a lot of amazing things today. For those who want to learn more about Havisham, where should they go to find that information?
So there's a few options. You can obviously go to the website. It's havishamhouse.com. And we're also on Facebook, separately as Havisham House and as Havisham Bourbon Brew and Spirits. And Instagram, or Havisham Bourbon Bar. And then if you just want to email me, it's bourbon@havishamhouse.com.
So much to look forward to. So Crystal Schilling, General Manager, Havisham Bourbon Brew and Spirits.
You got it.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's
Thank
been
you for
a
having
pleasure,
me.
and we just look forward to coming back again and visiting more and having lots of other folks do the same.
So thank you. And speaking of thanks, we have to thank our sponsors, Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond, Harley Davidson and RV, Fowler Heating and Cooling, Swinford Media Group, Watermark Auto Group Foundation, and our producer, Luke O'Neill, and his company, Union Street Arts.
Very good. And then once again, this is Small Town Big Business. You can find us on your podcast platforms, also on the YouTube channel, just by searching Small Town Big Business. And don't forget to subscribe. We also have an entire library of episodes that you'll want to check out. Lots of great guests, just like Crystal. And again, my name is Deb Barnett. I'm the Executive Director for Southern Illinois Now. You can learn more about that at southernillinoisnow.org.
And my name's Jennifer Olson. I'm employed by the city of Marion, and when I'm not doing all other duties as assigned, I'm doing business development. You can find me at City Hall here on Tower Square Plaza, or get my contact information off LinkedIn. Thanks for being with us.
Have a great day.